Thank you all. Everybody ready? So we're here today with a purpose, and a couple things I think need to be said, and I'm sure all of us would express it in our own way. Yesterday was a tragic day for America. Charlie Kirk was assassinated. From a Republican point of view, he was one of the leading voices in the MAGA world. He organized campuses to spread conservatism. On our side of the aisle, we saw him as a great force. I think Democrats, whether they agreed with him or not, understand that this is not the way you have discourse in the country. And we're just here as a group to say America cannot govern itself this way. We all have to speak with one voice and find the person who did this and bring them to justice. Secondly, this is 9/11. I remember where I was at 24 years ago. I'm sure all of us do. I was up here getting ready to go work. I got a call from my office, turned on the TV, saw a plane going to the tower. I thought it was a movie. Turned out not to be a movie. So 24 years later, we remember the victims of 9/11, but I think we're losing the lessons of 9/11 as a nation. 24 years later, Russia has for the second time invaded Ukraine. In 2025, over 1 million people have been wounded or killed in a conflict in the heart of Europe, on the European continent. So containing the bad guys and standing up to them is a lesson we've lost. Looking inward is okay, but you also have to look outside the country. The lessons of 9/11, what goes on in Afghanistan actually could matter to you. That when they're blowing up a statue of Buddha in Afghanistan, maybe as a Christian, you're in harm's way here. So I would say that when one country wants to take over another country and exploit the population, rape and murder the people, defy international norms, you should be concerned because it will matter to us. So in the 1990s, Ukraine gave up 1,700 nuclear weapons with a promise their sovereignty would be protected by Russia, the Brits, and the United States, and along comes Putin. In 2014, he invades. In 2022, he invades. And literally over 1 million people have been killed or injured, and millions have been displaced. So I would argue 24 years later, we kind of let our guard down when it comes to people like Putin. So what are we going to do today? We're going to try to create another front against Putin's Russia. We're all united about making people who buy cheap Russian oil, China, India, and Brazil, buy it cheap and prop up Putin's war machine to think twice about doing it by going after their economies. If you buy cheap Russian oil to prop up Putin's war machine, we're going to create a system where you can be tariffed here. Pick between our economy and cheap Russian oil. So we've brought a lot of attention to that matter. But there's another pressing issue that the world has not talked enough about. Senator Klobuchar was the earliest and leading voice on behalf of the children. Now, how did I know about this? Katie told me that Amy's got a resolution about 19,000, 20,000 children that have been kidnapped by the Russians from Ukrainian families. I said, are you sure about this? And yeah, Amy was right. Katie was right to be concerned. This is 2025. The Russians have invaded Ukraine, and they have kidnapped, we think, 19,546 Ukrainian children away from their families in Ukraine, brought them to Russia in some form, and the teenagers, they're training them to fight their own country. What's the right answer? Do something about it. Get off our ass as a world and make this, like, unacceptable. So there are, 4 countries under U.S. law that have the designation of being a state sponsor of terrorism. We're here today to say you need to add one more. So this legislation if passed, would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law until they return the children. If you want to vote no, we will make you famous. You need to vote. Thune and Schumer need to bring this bill up soon so we can tell Europe and the rest of the world, follow our lead. What does it matter to be a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law? Your economy is radioactive. You do business with Russia at your own peril. We have laws on the books that punish state sponsor of terrorism. It's hard to get on that list. Well, let me tell you, Russia's earned the right to be on this list. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out our bill today. We're going to ask leaders of both parties to give us a chance to debate this and vote on it. And we want to put in motion right now a process that would lead quickly to Russia being a state sponsor of terrorism, telling everybody in the world who props up Putin, you're running afoul of U.S. law, and we're watching what you're doing, and you're going to pay a heavy price. It's one thing to go after their oil sales. We're doing that. But somebody needs to speak up for the children. We're doing that today. And we're going to have all of our colleagues lend their voice to our cause. And we're going to make Russia, under U.S. law, what they are. Terrorists. This is what terrorists do. They rape, they murder, they kidnap. So I'm looking forward to this debate, as you can tell. I'm looking forward to this vote. And if Russia doesn't want to be a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law, return the children. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Graham, as always, for your leadership. Senator Graham and I have been to Ukraine 8 times over the last 3 years. We've been there together. We've worked together on various measures, and we've seen some of those kidnapped children. I want to begin by saying that political violence should be condemned and stopped, no matter what your politics, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. Violence has no place in America and American political discourse. I think we can all agree that violence ought to be solidly denounced, condemned, and stopped in America. And the spreading frequency and severity of violence should be sickening and shocking to all Americans. No matter what your politics, political violence has to stop. And there is a through line from 9/11 to all of the political killings to the terrorism that we're seeing in Ukraine, which is violence. The violent abduction of these children is a crime against humanity. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. Among the 20,000 children that he has abducted and kidnapped is a 2-year-old infant who will never know her name. She'll never know her parents or the town where she was born. She's been taken from them and placed in another family where she will be taught Russian, not Ukrainian. And she will be taught to hate Ukraine because Vladimir Putin believes that there is no Ukraine. What he is seeking to do by kidnapping these children is to erase Ukraine from the face of the earth. We've seen it before in Europe. And we've called the leaders who did it war criminals, and we've condemned some of them to death. Now, what we're doing here is calling Russia what it is under Vladimir Putin's leadership, which is a state sponsor of terrorism. And it will continue to be a state sponsor of terrorism unless it returns those children. And new leadership in Russia can remove it from that list. But for now, we want to add it to that poster. In fact, if somebody has a magic marker, We can do it right now.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. How do you spell Russia? All right, guys.
Thank you. So that's where Russia belongs. That's the club. That's the group, a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, I know there are all kinds of practical questions. What does it mean? What's the impact? And the point here is it brands Russia for what it is in the eyes of the world. A member of this exclusive pariah club that nobody wants to join, and condemns them not only for moral purposes, but also economic goals as well. So, I would just say this measure is no substitute for our sanctions bill, which is also bipartisan, 85 co-sponsors. I call on the majority leader to give us a vote on the sanctions bill after this incursion in Poland. The time is now to show strength. What we're watching right now in Europe is a slow motion Munich. Appeasement is not a strategy. We need scorching sanctions that will cripple Putin's economy by stopping the flow of money from India, China, Brazil, and others who are buying Russian oil and gas. The best way to bring Putin to the table and achieve peace is to cripple his economy. And that's the goal of our sanctions bill, which we hope will actually inspire President Trump to continue what he is doing as he imposed sanctions on India. More action is important now, more important than ever. But let me just close by saying there really is a moral as well as a political imperative here. The world has to stand for something bigger than just military and economic might. There is a moral imperative about the abduction and kidnapping of children, sending them to families where their identities are erased, or re-education institutions where they are remolded as people. This kind of atrocity we thought ended decades, even centuries ago. It is inhumane. It is an atrocity and a war crime. And the United States Congress should stand up and call it what it is. And I am really proud and grateful to be part of this bipartisan group in raising this issue. Senator Klobuchar.
All right. Thank you very much to both of you. Thank you as well to Senator Britt. I also, like my colleagues, want to make very clear that there is no place for this political violence. And you think about Charlie Kirk's wife today, you think about those little babies that are never going to know their dad growing up. And I can't help but think about what's happened in Minnesota this summer. Same thing, right? A madman killing our former Speaker of the House and her husband, gunning them down in their house, killing, attempting to kill another legislator, 8 bullets through him, 9 bullets through his wife. That all happened in our state. And the next one, I'm going to yet another funeral on Sunday of a little 10-year-old girl named Harper, gunned down. Well, they weren't politicians, these were kids, while they were praying in Mass. Fletcher's funeral was last weekend. We were all there. The manifesto was political. It was all-purpose. The shooter was a all-purpose hater against every side, every which way. But that's what we're seeing right now, and it has to end, and we have to join together to condemn it. So we're here today on another atrocity, and that is these Ukrainian kids. Etched in my memory forever will be the trips that I took to Ukraine, one of them with Senator Blumenthal, but another with Senator Portman, the burned out apartment buildings, the mass graves. It just goes on and on and on. And now you have nearly 20,000 kids. It's one estimate, one is at 35,000, with only 1,600 returned. And if you want to know what terrorism about, it's kidnapping kids. And one of the things that we have made very clear is that these kids must be returned before there's any negotiation on the war, only because you can't start having incentives for combatants in war to capture and kidnap kids. These kids, Lindsey mentioned the ones that were being trained to be part of military in Russia. You also have kids that parents, desperate, were told, well, just come to a summer camp in Russia, and it'll be a way for them to take a break. It'll be a safe place, and they never come back. You have kids that were taken either in the war zone or more likely in a situation like this when they were so young that they can't even remember their Ukrainian language or the Ukrainian culture. And the parents aren't going to be able to identify them because they were 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds when they were taken. And now they've been there for 2 years, 3 years. That's what's happening right now. I did a meeting with some of the families, Ukrainian families in Minnesota, and as one of the moms told me, Irina, when we met them, she's talking about the one she met, a few that came back, they didn't cry, they didn't scream, they just stared, eyes wide, eyes empty. So that is why I support this bill, but it is also why Senator Grassley and I came together on our resolution. But there's another bill that's very complementary to this right now that we're working, and I believe will get included in the defense bill, and that is to make sure that we keep tracking, that we assist the Ukrainians in tracking these kids. And we appreciate the First Lady's involvement in writing a letter to Vladimir Putin directly about these kids. And we believe that this must be bipartisan as we go forward. But Senator Grassley and I are hopeful that this will complement this new bill, and that is that we make sure that as a nation we're continuing to track these kids so that when this war ends or even before it ends, we will know who's out there and as best as our ability where they are so they can be reunited with their families. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar, thank you for bringing this to light and making sure that we all could focus in on it. And Senator Graham, thank you for your leadership on this, and Senator Blumenthal and bringing us here today. Before I start on the issue at hand, I want to echo what you've heard from my colleagues. Political violence has no place in America. What we saw yesterday, and everyone saw it, is sickening. It is disgusting. It was a political assassination. And all of you sitting in these rows have a duty and an obligation to call it that. You know, when I'm thinking about Charlie, obviously his faith was the most important thing in his life. His wife, his children, our prayers are with them. But he influenced countless Americans and people across the world. My kids being amongst those groups. Talking with them last night, talking through this with them last night, is just unthinkable that this is happening in the United States of America. And so the time for unity, the time for peace, it is now. I think back to when Senator Graham talked about 9/11. I was in a college class. There in the business school, a really large lecture hall, and the uncertainty of the events were startling for everyone. People were getting various news. I'm sure every one of you remember exactly where you were and how you handled it and the uncertainty of the days ahead. You know, I think about where we are right now and what we're here to talk about. And they have covered this beautifully. I want to focus on the kids. As a mom, I cannot even imagine what it is like to have your child torn from your arms, to know that they're celebrating a birthday or that they had a really bad day and have no one to love them, to hug them, to talk them through it. Knowing that there are not only milestones are missing, but there are moments where you want to create a foundation for your child to be able to stand tall, to stand strong. You think about the uncertainty that these children are feeling, torn from everything they ever knew. We have to speak loudly into this issue, not just today, but every day. And the truth is, we need your help. We've got to elevate this issue in order to be able to bring these children home. And I call on our European friends to stand taller. We all need to be using every tool in our toolbox to bring these babies, to bring these children home. It is clear that Putin will never do the right thing without being forced to. And now is time to make that happen. So thank you for being here. Thank you for covering this. Help us get these kids home.
A couple of questions. I have to go. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Graham, I know you talked to the president yesterday. How was your conversation? Because by my count, it's been 6 months since you first started talking and pushing for this bill. When does the patience run out?
Well, this bill is, I can't remember how long we've talked about this one, but this one's relatively new on people's radar screen. That's why we don't do the news conference. And back to Amy, she's the one that brought this to my attention. And, you know, I think what people understand what's going on in Russia with these kids, hopefully tonight a firestorm. So I talked to him about moving forward. He's very intent on making China pay for propping up Putin. He's in discussions with Europe. I talked to Ursula, the EU commissioner, this morning. He's trying to get Europe to do more, to follow our lead. I've heard Europeans say, well, the Chinese buy a lot of high-end goods. Too bad. We got to let that mentality go and put China and India in a box to get Putin to the table. So he's talking to the Europeans about things they can do to up their game. I think he's got some pretty serious plans for China. And I encourage the president to, that our bill would help him. That our bill would be, Congress would be basically giving him the authority to do what he's doing, which would help him in court.
Senator Graham, had this bill been enforced a month ago, would President Putin have been allowed to set foot on American soil in Alaska?
You know, that's a good question. Probably not. And let me just say this. I don't care how we end the war as long as we end it justly. The children come home. There's no third invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine's independent and sovereign. So my point is, we've tried the red carpet approach. It ain't working. There's more attacks today than there were before. And this is just a reality. Poland, 8 drones, or 19, whatever it is, crosses into Polish airspace. This is on the wrong trajectory, and what we're trying to do today is create a tool that will help President Trump end this war. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, 2 questions. One, if this bill became law, would that mean that the U.S. couldn't import anything from Russia, as is the case for North Korea and Cuba? We don't import a lot, but we do still import.
There are some exceptions about national security. Doesn't mean you can't talk. We talked to the Iranians, during the negotiations. You can be a state sponsor of terrorism, we can still talk to you, Syria is a state sponsor of terrorism. We're trying to give them a way forward. So it doesn't foreclose dialogue, but what it does, it labels you in a way hard for you to grow your economy. I think we've got a common theme here. We will make it harder for Putin to fund this war.
And then on your sanctions bill, is the leader willing to bring it forward for a vote? You say
I'm
you're trying
going to talk to him today about that based on my meeting at the White House. Anybody else want to say anything?
Good.
Yeah.
Senator Graham, were you also considering adding Belarus on this list?
Yeah, I was. There's some connection. Well, they just released some hostages today, and maybe there'll be a breakthrough with Belarus here. We'll
We haven't foreclosed.
We haven't foreclosed it, but we're focusing on Russia today.
On that, what is your reaction to administration agreeing to lift part of the
Well,
sanctions?
I'm glad the hostages are out. I'll trust their judgment about how to do that, but we're not giving Belarus. We're still looking at them. Yeah.
Thanks, Senator. Would this have any significant military consequences for Russia, and is that your intent?
It has,
How we would deal with
okay, it has significant economic consequences to Russia. Russia is the most exposed enemy that we've probably ever faced because they have a single source of revenue, fossil fuels. Their banking industry, you know, they do other things. But this designation makes it very difficult for you to do any above-board business with Russia. We have Europeans have sanctions on Russia. Clearly, they're not getting him to the table, right? Look at who's on this list. Anybody want to go to Cuba, North Korea, Syria, and set up business right now? Probably not. By putting Russia in that category, I think we're going to do a lot to cripple Putin's ability to maintain this war.
A company that does business with a state sponsor of terrorism is going to have a lot of explaining to do to consumers, to suppliers, to everyone involved. It makes Russia a pariah state.
The other thing I want to add here is that this has been practically done is getting these kids back is not something that's just like some distant possibility.
Right.
If they're really serious about wanting to negotiate peace or come back to the table again, this has got to happen, as I said, before an agreement, or we will be setting and the world will be setting a horrible precedent. So the idea here is it is a further incentive to get this moving and to get these kids back, which we have to do anyway. And every single, in their lives, if they're 6 years old, every single month, right, for them is like another year. And we're denying them being in their home country, their home culture, their home language. So it is important to note that this is tied to getting the kids home.
And I will just mention, we spoke to President Zelensky on our last trip about this issue. And I just left a meeting with Ukrainian people who deal with veterans. This issue is so profoundly important to Ukraine people. If you begin a conversation with Ukrainians, this issue is front and center, as you would expect it would be. Imagine if 20,000 American children were abducted by Russia. The President of the United States would be talking about it every day. In fact, we would have gone to war. These children are more than a number, more than a statistic. They are individual members of families of Ukrainians. And so this measure we may regard as symbolic, but for them it is at the center of Ukraine's existence because it is part of Putin's effort to erase Ukraine from the face of the earth. That's his goal here, to make it Russian territory,
Right.
to eliminate Ukrainian language and culture and religion, and to abduct children so that they can be re-educated. And for Ukrainians, this measure would be a major morale booster.
Yeah. Two more. Her than you. Okay.
Thank you. Claire Manuel from the French Weekly Report. Senator, you alluded to a slow-motion Munich. What would you like European leaders to do? What would be your message to them today, and especially to France?
I support President Trump in asking Europeans to do more, devote more of their budgets to military aid for Ukraine, buying American arms that can be transferred to Ukraine, more F-16s, long-range artillery, interceptors for their Patriot missile systems, and yes, more drones. But America also has to step up with increased production capacity so as to have the munitions and artillery and other arms that can be transferred to Ukraine. But I also want to see European economic sanctions coordinated with American economic sanctions.
They have like a lot of sanctions Europe has put on. They got 19 more. They're looking at oil refineries. They're stepping in the right direction. What do I want the French to do? Tell China and India, as long as you prop Putin up, you can't have access to our economy the way you used to. Make Russia, China and India have to pick between the European economy and the American economy and helping Putin keep the war going. People tell me that India is a prideful country. Well, they got a lot to be proud about. This is not one of their finest hours. Before the war, India was buying 3% of Russian oil. It's close to 30%. They buy it dirt cheap, they refine it in India, and they sell it to the Europeans. Stop buying oil from India, where India buys it cheap from Russia. Stop rewarding that behavior. As to China, they have a big economy. We all want to do business with China. This war would end in 24 hours if Xi told Putin to knock it off. They're the #1 customer of Russia when it comes to oil and gas purchases. If your #1 customer says, I can no longer do business with you like I used to, then we'll have a negotiation to end this war. So what can Europe do? What can France do? Do to India what Trump has done to India. Join us to hit China hard. There is no way, to my friends in France, to get this war to end without suffering some. And what we're asking for is economic disruption versus having your children stolen from you and your towns obliterated. So we need to go back to that old mentality that allowed us working together to beat the Nazis. Whatever you had to do, you did in World War II to beat the Nazis. That mentality doesn't exist today. Russia is a threat to the continent of Europe. He's a terrorist by any definition, and those who prop him up should pay a heavy price.
Demanding the return of Ukrainian children before any peace deal is negotiated implies that President Putin is serious about negotiating peace, but you've seen what he did in this week. Is he?
I love what Senator Klobuchar said. If you're really serious about changing who you are, return the children. And if you deny you have them, let's have a debate in front of the world about who's right. So, yeah.
And, you know,
Like
the idea was that we would demand a ceasefire. A ceasefire accompanied with exchange of prisoners and a return of the children.
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's a
then
good construct.
peace negotiations.
Yeah, I like that.
That is the plan and the path toward peace. And it's realistic if Putin really wants peace, but he's showing every sign he wants continued war. He is stonewalling and playing the United States of America. And this latest attack on Poland, I'm calling it an attack because it couldn't have been inadvertent. And today there was testimony. I was there in the Armed Services Committee. I asked the nominee for vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, could this have been inadvertent? And he was measured and cautious, but basically he said there's no way it could have been inadvertent given Russia's military capacity. Yes. For 9 to 18 drones being sent over Poland, no accident.
Last one.
Senator, are you aware whether Melania Trump, the First Lady, is engaged on this issue?
You know, I want to echo what was said by, her voice really mattered here. I think she wrote that letter for a reason. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but our First Lady brought attention to not particularly this issue, but the plight of children that allowed us to have a stronger platform. But yes, I think her focus and attention to what's happening to children really did matter, and I want to applaud her for that. And here's my challenge to Russia. If you don't think we're right, tell us why. Go to the media and say it's not 19,536. Give a answer to the accusation.
Is this a binding or a non-binding resolution? I know you guys passed a similar measure.
Well, you know, this resolution is urging the Secretary of State, but we also do the designation. I think when it passes, that problem will be solved, that Marco, when he sees, you know, 90 votes, they will do it. But the resolution is designed to make them under U.S. law.
Just to clarify, the bill says the Secretary of State
Shall.
shall designate Russia as a state-sponsored terrorism within 60 days,
Yeah.
unless he finds that the children have been returned.
Yeah.
And then he can take the designation away
Yeah.
if he finds later that they have been returned.
And it's all about the children. Thank you.
Thank you.